Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Christopher. I am a reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library, and today is our lunch time with librarians. And this is my colleague, Mary Bear Shannon, who I'm interviewing today. And yeah, so we're just going to be talking. Well, I'm going to be interviewing Mary. She's going to be doing all the talking. And so, yeah, this is just one of the programs we have going on right now. We have many. Please check our Facebook page, YouTube channel, see what other things we have going on. And also at the moment, we do have our curbside pickup going on. And also just that next week, starting the 29th, we will be extending our hours slightly from Monday through Wednesday till 8 p.m. Thursday, 6 p.m., and then Saturday, 10 to 5. But yeah, starting next week, we'll be able to open a little longer so you can get some of those items. And do please check Catherine's Tech Time video on, again, our YouTube or Facebook channel about searching our catalog and how to check and request things out. All right. So to start off, I guess, Mary, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I have been at the library for about 9.5 years. I came in January of 2011. I live here in Havertown with my family. I have two sons. One just graduated high school and one is a junior in college.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. And I also live with my husband here in Havertown. So, and I love this community. It was just a bonus to be able to work somewhere where I also live to serve the people that I also who are also my neighbors. So
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Well, it is nice to see people in the grocery store that you've seen at the library.
Yeah.
So we have lived in Havertown for 19 years. I've lived in Philadelphia for almost 30. And I grew up in Delaware. I grew up in Wilmington and also spent some time in downstate Delaware. And then also spent some time in the West, in Salt Lake City. And then I went to college in Spokane, Washington, which is Eastern Washington State. So very different than Seattle.
To say the least.
Yeah, very dry, very cold in the wintertime, and just not the same kind of progressive sensibilities as the western part of Washington State. I know you're from Oregon, so you know that there is kind of that divide between East and West.
Yeah.
The Pacific Northwest. But I've been in Philly for about 30 years and in Havertown for about 19.
All right. Well then, what do you love most about, I guess, just being a librarian and working here, or just working in libraries in general?
Well, libraries are. I love the place that libraries have in communities. I feel really strongly that libraries are really the kind of the community hub, which I think is different than the library that I grew up with. I mean, I have very fond memories of the Greater Wilmington Public Library, which is where I got my first library card. But I do think that we do occupy a different role in the community now, as a meeting place, as a place for lifelong learning, and a place to gather too. Of course, we're not able to do that at the moment, but I do, in the time that I've been here and the time that I have interacted with libraries, I really feel like that is a critical part. And I think that is why I love what I do, is being part of that community. I think living here has also been nice to, it gives me that sense of we're kind of all in this together, and it's everything that I do for the library only helps me and my family because we are the recipients of a strong library. So that's kind of where my heart is about libraries.
Yes, the libraries. All right. Well, I guess you did tell us a little bit about yourself, but what did you do before you came to work here at HTFL then?
Well, so being a librarian was a bit of an accident. I didn't start out thinking I wanted to work in libraries.
Okay.
I have 2 degrees in history. I have an undergrad
Ah,
and a graduate degree. And I thought I was going to work in a museum, actually. That's really what I thought.
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I
I
interned
also thought
at
that too.
Yeah, I interned at the Smithsonian at the American History Museum. After my undergraduate degree, I interned at the now defunct Atwater Kent Museum, which is the Philadelphia History Museum, in graduate school. But I ended up working mostly in nonprofits, really facilitating programming, and the both for children as well as for adults. And probably the thing I did probably the most remarkable was working for the Pennsylvania Humanities Council for about 7 years, and helping to facilitate programs in libraries, historical societies, other community organizations in the humanities. And that was really what I was working on. And then I had kind of not a midlife crisis, but decided that I really, programming was, for me, always connected with education and lifelong learning. So I went and got a certification in secondary education in social studies, thinking I was going to be a social studies teacher. And I did do a number of years of kind of teaching with temporary jobs. I was in the process of looking for a full-time job when the recession hit. And I was, while I was looking for a part-time job, and I just happened to kind of stumble onto a job here. And so I came here kind of as a part-time worker to do programming and some fundraising. It turned into what it is today. I'm a reference librarian that does our adult programming as part of an adult service. And we do, when we're not in pandemic, we do over 200 programs a year here. But it was all kind of an accident, a happy accident.
Very accidental, yes, but that's how it works sometimes.
It is. But it all kind of follows in terms of, my commitment and my passion to lifelong learning. I think that the libraries are just another way of doing that.
Well, glad to have you then. I don't know where we'd be without your, I guess, skills in programming.
Yep.
So I guess what drew you just to librarianship? I mean, it was completely accidental, like you said, but did it ever cross your mind to be a librarian at all?
No. I think the reason is I was actually I was slow to come to reading as a child. It really wasn't until kind of later on in my elementary school years that I really discovered chapter books. Of course, from my era, it was Judy Blume books and Nancy Drew. There were, but I was, and I'm still a very slow reader. Some of my colleagues read way more books in a year than I will ever get to. But I do love reading. And I guess the thing that, even though I didn't think about this kind of coming along, was that, just the door that reading gives to us in terms of understanding different experiences. And I think that is, it's so easy for us to just kind of get stuck in our own experience. And I think books are a way to kind of give us a perspective that we may not be able to see. And I think authors can do that for us.
Indeed. Yeah. Imagination and all that.
Yep.
So I guess based on reading, what are some of your favorite books then?
Well, so I think that I like any book that's actually going to challenge me. I mean, I do like some of the things that kind of give me comfort, but I think the ones that always stick out to me are the ones that put me in a different world than my own. And so I think about, you know, nonfiction. I love nonfiction, and I like mysteries too. And I think that especially for nonfiction, if it's teaching me something that I might not have ever considered, I think that's what. So those are the types of books I'm looking for. And in terms of favorite books, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that usually my favorite book is whatever I've just finished reading.
Yeah, I
I
guess
mean,
that's a good call.
I rarely get a book that I'm like, oh, I didn't like that. I mean, there are books that
Yeah.
but most of the time, I'm really, even though I'm slow, I'm really about finishing things. So, and usually I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I read that. And no regrets, no regrets. So
Generally, I would think, yeah. So sounds like mystery and nonfiction are your favorite genres then.
mm-hmm. I love young adult fiction too. I actually am part of a young adult fiction book group, and it's just adults that read young adult fiction. So that's another genre. One I just read recently was by Elizabeth Acevedo, and she wrote The Fire on High. And I think she also wrote Poet X, and they're young adult fiction. This last one, The Fire on High, is actually set in Philadelphia. It offered a perspective that I haven't experienced. This is a young woman who is a teenage mother, but also lives in a part of Philadelphia that I'm not familiar with at all. What they call the Badlands, but just her triumph of spirit was really great to see. So I think YA fiction is probably my favorite genre.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, it's just the younger writings. They are more engrossing at times, but sometimes.
I think it's some of the most innovative writing that I see these days is YA fiction. I mean, it's
now they're trying to get younger readers involved. So
yeah, and it's so much more than what I grew up with, even though those are some of my favorites. But I just think of the few choices a young girl had, when I was growing up, and how many more choices there are now, and how good the writing is.
Yeah, indeed. So I guess, what were some of your favorite books growing up then? Even though it sounds like it wasn't much.
I definitely had some favorites. Judy Blume were some of my favorite YA fiction. I also was a big Nancy Drew fan. I loved the Little House books. I read them over a number of times. And I loved Madeleine L'Engle. A Wrinkle in Time was my all-time favorites. And then another favorite was From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. That was, I'm trying to remember her name, who wrote it, and is going to come to me later. It's about two kids that run away to the Met. And it's set in the late 60s. My YA group just read it as to mark its 50 years in being published, but I think it still really stands up. So. Yeah,
a lot of books just stand the trial of time, like The Hobbit, one of my favorite books, and just still around.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what books, I guess, then have you read just over and over to the point they're falling apart even?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you would mention The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. My husband, those are the books he reads over and over again. He just, his copies are completely tattered. But I would say the books I read over and over again, every couple of years I read the entire Harry Potter series. And our copies at home are quite tattered. From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, I've read that. I picked that up every couple of years. Wrinkle in Time, I have read over and over again. So there are some ones that really do stand out for me. But I would say probably the Harry Potter series. They just never get boring.
Yeah, yeah. I think everybody's just read that more than one time, to say the least.
Right. And
So,
I find that with I've watched all the movies, and it's always good to go back to the book, because there are definitely things the movies left out, and I kind of rediscover things in the books that I'd forgotten were in there because they didn't make it to the movies. So.
yeah, it's sad, but well, Hollywood movies, two different things. So.
Right. It's movie making's very different than writing a book.
Indeed. So I guess since Harry Potter is the one thing you've read the most, at least now, is just what Harry Potter house are you then?
I'm a Ravenclaw.
I kind of figured.
So yeah,
Academic.
I think most of us hope we're a Gryffindor, but I think the reality is that I'm a Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, personalities. Everybody has. Now, I guess that's why they had the sorting hat in Harry Potter, just to be able to.
That's right.
You can't figure it out. The hat figures it out for you.
Figure it out. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, do you have a favorite virtual program that you've done recently over these past 3 months we've been in quarantine?
Well, I've been doing this Kickin' Cooking in Quarantine on Mondays at 5. And I have been talking about food and demonstrating recipes from my home. And I have to say, I think that is one of my favorite, although usually on Monday morning I go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do today? And usually, by 5 I have it figured out, but there's kind of that panic on Monday morning about, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and cooking sometimes is a science.
It is a science and an art. So yeah, recently I've come to really enjoy Herb Corner with Jen and Mary. We just did our second installment yesterday on Wednesday, and that is kind of a close second.
All right. So cooking and Herb Corner, yes.
Yep.
Those are very popular from what I've seen.
All
right. Yeah. So I guess different question. Where do you like to, travel or visit, especially now that we're in quarantine, or do you have some sort of like bucket list, even just of places you want to visit, perhaps?
There's certain places that I love to go if I really want to relax and kind of turn off. My in-laws have a place in southern Vermont, which we like to go to, which is, we've seen everything feel like we've seen everything in the area, but that's a good place just to go and relax. I've seen a good chunk of the East Coast. I lived in the West. I've seen, I've been to almost all the states, but I definitely have some places that I've yet to see in this country. There's still a lot of national parks I haven't seen. It's hard to believe I lived out in the West but never saw Yellowstone. And then many of the national parks in southern Utah, Arches and Bryce, I'm just kind of, now I kind of kick myself that I didn't see them when I was there. So there are.
My dad, we once had to go travel across country just because a member of the family died, had to move all their things and everything. And yeah, my dad regrets we never stopped by Yellowstone.
Yeah. I just think Glacier National Park in Montana, I'd like to see. And I've never seen Yosemite. So there's just places that I've driven by but didn't. Maybe it was just my age. I was either a teenager or a young 20-something, and but now I'm kind of sorry. There are places around the world that I have in my bucket list. I really want to see Istanbul and see the Hagia Sophia, which I hear is just amazing, which was created as a cathedral, a Christian cathedral, and then was made into a mosque, and now it's kind of no religion, but the architecture is supposed to be amazing. It's one of the largest structures still in terms of a kind of landmass that it occupies on that site. I'd really like to see Chile and Argentina. That's something that both my son and I have on our bucket list. So hopefully we'll get there someday. And I've never been to Paris. I've been to southern France, but I have never been to Paris. I was very sorry to see the Notre Dame burn before I actually got to see it. So probably by the time I get there, it'll be rebuilt. But that was
I'll be the same.
That was a real disappointment. And the beaches of Normandy. The beaches of Normandy, I think, I'm sure are very powerful. Very powerful.
Yeah. Well, especially if anybody's ever seen Saving Private Ryan. That wasn't the same place. Of course, they had to pick a different fictional place. But it resonates. But well, you'll get there someday. Save up all that money.
I know that I make here working as a librarian. So.
Yeah. So I guess going off on a different topic, what are you going to remember most right now about the quarantine?
It's funny because I think, I guess I would want to think positively. I mean, I'm not about what was your favorite thing. I'm not sure if I have a favorite thing about quarantine. I think just the being with my family. Yeah, we all kind of drove each other crazy, but the fact is we were all together. We were all safe and healthy, and we remained safe and healthy. Yes, there were days that just felt like they, one kind of ran into the next. But I think just the fact that we were together, and we tried very hard to still have a family dinner together. But there were definitely parts of the day where we were like, okay, how far away can I get from the rest of the family and still be in the house, which is hard in our kind of tiny house. But dinner was always that time where we were always back together, even though none of us could actually say, well, what did you do today? Because we all knew what you did today. So yeah, I think probably just the knowledge that we were together and that we were all safe.
Yeah, especially during these very uncertain times.
Yes.
Right. So I guess a personal question then, do you have any pets?
I do. And probably now that I think about your question before, probably the best part of quarantine is we had the dog with us all the time. Our dog Charlie, he's a chocolate lab, and he is, in my opinion, is the best dog in Havertown. But he was good therapy. Let's just say he was good dog therapy while we were in quarantine. I have two cats. One is named. Actually, both my cats are named after strong female YA fiction characters. The one cat is Nymphadora Tonks, after Harry Potter, and the other one is Captain Holly Short, from the Artemis Fowl series. So they're okay with therapy. They're not terribly cuddly, but they were good to have too in quarantine.
Yeah, cats, they only like the cuddle when they like the cuddle.
Right. They're definitely, it's all on their terms.
Yeah. They say cats, I don't know, there's some sort of saying that cats rule your life. And
They call the shots. They definitely call the shots.
So I guess going off on a very different tangent then, what are you reading right now? Because we're doing our reading with reference and sneak peeks.
Yes. Well, so right now I'm actually reading some fiction, The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. I'm actually listening to it on audiobook through Libby. And I just finished a book for our Hooked on History group called Medieval Bodies, which was a way to kind of talk about medieval life through the different parts of our body. So when he talked about feet, he talked about travel. And when he talked about blood, he talked about the significance of blood in religious life, but in other aspects of medieval people's lives. It was fascinating, and I just finished that this past weekend.
Oh, that sounds like a different way to do history than just
It was,
one.
and I have these two degrees in history, and I'm really much more of what I would call kind of a pots and pans history buff. I really am much more interested in how people lived.
Mm,
I do pay attention to the presidents and the leaders, but it's not my favorite. I'd much rather know how regular folk lived their lives during whatever period of time, and what their hopes and dreams were.
yeah, well, sounds very interesting. I guess we'll hear about it next week in our reading reference then.
Yep.
And then I guess finishing up, since we only have a little time left here, what do you like most about serving the patrons in this community now?
Well, people here are just the best. We really do have the best patrons around. They're engaged. They're just they're good readers. They're just and I think that is and I think about Havertown is that it's a very involved community. People do step up when there is a need, when there are people who are hurting, when people, when there is something that's significant. It just feels like Havertown is there. It's not a perfect community, but I think that for a community, I think it's one of the better ones, and it just makes it more pleasurable to serve them as patrons. Because they're engaged in our programs. They're big users of the library, both virtual and in physical, and they're so grateful. I mean, they're just so pleasant to our circ staff and our reference staff. I just don't think there's not that sense of entitlement. They really are just glad to have us here, and I think we definitely feel that.
Indeed, indeed. All right. Well, so that is all the questions then for today. And well, we are going to continue doing these interviews. So please tune in next Friday at 12:30, same time as usual. And also, again, just also be aware of all the other programs we have on our Facebook and YouTube channel. And well, until we all meet again online, everyone, I guess this just concludes our lunch time with a librarian today. And well, hope to see you again online, everyone. So,
Bye.
bye-bye.